This episode of the Seniors Flourish podcast is brought to you by the Learning Lab membership, because I get it. I was working with older adults in home health when I started out, and I was the only OT practitioner. I was new, I had no mentorship, I struggled with the little things at work, and I was so incredibly overwhelmed. I was struggling to keep up with that paperwork, and because I was working such ridiculously long hours, trying to research best practice, find all the patient handouts I needed, I just couldn't keep up with it all. And the worst part is I was constantly doubting myself. Am I really doing what's best for my new patients? That's why I created the Learning Lab, because I desperately needed a way to get organized and have everything I needed at my fingertips. So it's cheaper than a textbook, but it has hundreds of treatment idea videos, patient handouts, evidence-based resources, and more right at your fingertips when you need it. So join today at seniorsflourish.com/Learning Lab.
Welcome to the Seniors Flourish podcast, where it's all about helping occupational therapy practitioners disrupt the norm by throwing away the rainbow art and being the best you can be when working with older adults.
Welcome, everyone, to the Seniors Flourish podcast. My name is Mandy Chamberlain. I'm an occupational therapist, and on the podcast, I'd love to talk about everything about occupational therapy and specifically working with the older adult and anything that has to do with professional issues around occupational therapy, what's going on in the clinics, what's going on with your patients, and much, much more. So today we are talking about occupational therapist and occupational therapy assistant collaboration. This is a great topic, and I'm so excited to have my guest, Melissa Tilton. She's an occupational therapy assistant, and we are going to jump in on this discussion and give some really good practical tips for collaboration and what are some of the differences between occupational therapist and occupational therapy assistant, and just have a really awesome discussion on how we can strengthen the collaboration between the two. So welcome, Melissa. I'm happy you're here today.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
So if you are a regular listener of the OT or Seniors Flourish podcast, I always love to start out by having my guests talk about their OT journey, what they're doing now. So let's just start there, Melissa.
Sure. So again, thanks so much for having me. It's nice to be part of this and have been able to listen to your other podcasts. And I think for me, just having an opportunity to do some awareness and encouragement for other OTAs to be involved is an extra win.
Yeah.
I've been an occupational therapy assistant or an OTA for 23 years now. And it's so hard to believe how fast time goes. But I really had no idea about what occupational therapy was back when I was in high school. I went to college right out of high school, and I remember I worked at a Y camp on a waterfront, which is like the best summer job you could ever have when you're a teenager. Yeah,
that sounds amazing.
It's just a lot of fun, a lot of sunbathing and swimming. But I worked with two ladies. I worked with a lady named Cass, who was going to school to be an OT, and a lady named Missy, who was going to school to be a PT. And, I had a lot of time with these ladies, a lot of time to chat. And I really thought when I was getting out of high school, I wanted to work as a special ed teacher. I truly hadn't explored a lot of other things and never had even heard of occupational therapy. And I was going to high school up in Maine, where my dad retired from the Air Force. So, didn't have a ton of people that I knew, but was starting to kind of branch out, learn some more stuff. And both Cass and Missy were able to really talk to me about what it is that they do at work, what was so special about it, what really kind of stoked their passion and got them excited. And the more I spoke with Cass, the more I knew that this occupational therapy world kind of seemed pretty cool. And it also had a lot of the same things I was looking for when I was thinking of being a special ed teacher. You have that opportunity to be a coach, to be a teacher, to be someone who's encouraging. When I look at it now, like task analysis and finding meaning in your day, having a purposeful activity, they really overlap. So I kind of started to talk to her about it and said, yes, I gotta figure out what this job is. And I was really lucky that where I was going to high school up in Maine, they had just opened up the first OTA program. And it's actually still the only OTA program in Maine. And I kind of checked it out. It was a community college, which for me was exactly what I needed at that point in my life. I was not ready for anything else, and I applied, and it was the second class because it was a brand new program, so they had not even gone through accreditation. Which, when I think about it now, I thought, oh my gosh, how did I not get myself so worked up about that?
Yeah. Well,
it's just such a different
you're kind
world.
of going a little bit more blind.
Yeah, you're just like, you're young, you're winging it.
Yeah.
And I think, when I look back now, so lucky. The two professors who started the program, and one actually just retired. But Lynn and Diane, I mean, they quite honestly changed my life for the better. By just teaching me about occupational therapy, teaching me to be very proud of what occupational therapy is and the way that we can make a difference, and, just trying to be more mindful. I really wish I was more aware back then of the impact they were making.
Yeah.
I was lucky the other year I had the opportunity to kind of thank them and pay them my gratitude. But gosh, I wish I had known it back then. But it's been a really fantastic journey. I've had this opportunity to practice as an OTA, to practice. I did a little bit of work in mental health when PPS first hit. But my love is seniors, very similar to you, Mandy. I feel like there's a connection. We always joke here at my house, if we go out to eat or run an errand, there's like a magnet. And my other half, Ben, will say, what is it? Like, they're just connected to you.
It's like gravitational.
It is. That's where my heart is. And that's where, my career really has been in, skilled nursing, long-term care, really working with elderly, all of that kind of stuff. Trying to make a difference. And I've had the opportunity as an OTA to fill many different roles, from being a staff OTA to, being a lead, to being a backup, eventually working to where I am now. I'm essentially an area director.
Oh, okay.
So, we have a different title, but that's really what it is. I'm not that person who's into titles. I'm lucky. I get to work with about 16 different directors of rehab. We're on the same team. I help and support them and their teammates provide PT/OT speech services, which is pretty cool. I'm all here in the Boston area where I live. But this career has allowed me. I worked in Pennsylvania. I worked in Jersey, got to go to the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, which is a beautiful area.
I was just going to say, it's really pretty, isn't it?
It's so pretty. I mean, how would you ever have that opportunity? And it's just been something that I think, whether it be right time, right place, or just saying, hey, can I try that? Can I learn something? I've had this opportunity. And then probably, this is 2018, probably about 6 or 7 years ago, I really became intrigued by, teaching, learning, being able to do some guest lecturing. And I was really fortunate to guest lecture for some different schools and ended up having an adjunct position in an OTA program here in Massachusetts. And so I teach the leadership and management course each semester, which is kind of that couple of hours during the week where I'm refilling my bucket. I'm having an opportunity to, I hope, give back a little bit that I've received, talk with more OTAs, really talk about opportunities that they have, talk about opportunities that might not say OTA, but really are an opportunity for them. And so that's been a pretty cool thing.
Wow. You've done a lot, Melissa.
I don't know.
Sounds like a lot anyway. And I always see, because we're both on social media, and I always see you doing some things like at the AOTA conference and kind of rallying up the OTAs to get-togethers. And want to talk a little bit about that?
Sure.
Like what's your role there?
So I currently am serving on AOTA's board of directors as a director. So I'm there. I'm also serving as kind of the OTA rep, if you will. And that's just an opportunity. I've done a lot of volunteerism. That's also kind of what fills my bucket. I always joke, I don't have kids, so this is my opportunity to to have some other focus in life.
Yeah.
But so currently what I've been doing the last 2 years and in my third year serving on the board is primarily looking at OTA engagement, OTA inclusivity, OTA involvement, and also trying to support OTAs to also be comfortable, to kind of get out of the I'm just a OTA. My friend Barb, says that all the time. And so I've been trying to do that through social media, through going to different workshops across the country and just presenting to both OTs and OTAs, because I think it's important that we all understand what we all are able to do. But I think just having that opportunity to say, hey, you can do this, or, what is your passion? What's your personal vision statement? Okay, let's work on that. And, what is it that you want to be able to accomplish? How do you want to be involved? You want to work on your state board? Awesome. Okay, let's kind of put together a professional development plan. I'm a big believer in having one of those for yourself, and not just for work, but, we have to have one at work, but really what is one that's for yourself that has a lot of purpose and meaning and drives you in regards to what you want to be able to accomplish in your professional life. And I think just having that opportunity through being a board member, previously being on ACOTE, which is the accreditation body here in Massachusetts, working as volunteering as state president, I think it just gives you that opportunity. And the work is there. There's lots of work for lots of volunteers. So I'm always like, come on, bring another body. If I was in, I think, Kansas last year, and I had a personal goal of, I think I wanted 5 names. And I just kind of took the microphone. I was like, I need 5 OTAs who want to at least talk about being involved. I'm not going to sign you up for anything. I won't commit you. I just want to know that we can connect over being involved. And it was fantastic to leave with like a baggie full of different business cards.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Because people want to be involved, but I think it's hard. Life is busy. Sometimes we wait for someone to give us permission or to invite us personally. And I think all of us as practitioners have to say, I'm inviting you. Here's your invite. We're going to go together. We'll get a coffee. We'll get a tea, and we're going to go to that meeting together.
Yeah. Here's the opportunity.
Right.
Wow. That's so great. I think it's so important to be involved. And I actually think it helps with burnout, and it keeps you excited about the profession. And there's a lot. That's a whole nother podcast topic, Melissa.
Oh, that is a really goodness. Yeah. You just sparked something else there. Yeah.
I know. See? Okay. Let's just start with just a good old definition. What is the difference? Or let's define occupational therapist and occupational therapy assistant.
Sure. And I think I'll give you like a little cheat sheet of some different resources. But I think there's a ton of out there, especially on the AOTA website. Yeah. I think a lot of people do get both of the roles confused, or they assume one is an assistant to the other. And I really look at both OT and OTA as their parallel careers. Neither is worse or better or anything like that. There are going to be rate differences. That's life. There are going to be different opportunities and skill sets. That's part of it. But the occupational therapist is the person who is going to be responsible for the whole package. They're going to be doing the screening, the evaluation, the reevaluation. They are going to be the person who's interpreting any of the data that they're collecting, interpreting any of the assessments that they're doing. And they're going to be also typically adding a lot of theory. There's a lot more theory that is taught in an OT program than an OTA program. And they're going to be incorporating that. And an OTA is absolutely able to contribute to those things, state specific, of course, because every state is a little bit different. But an OTA is going to be able to contribute and collect data and give back some feedback in regards, to that evaluation, to that treatment plan. I really look at it as an OTA is really that person who is in a treatment setting is really hands-on. They are soup to nuts, that person who is using all of those skills that we all, learned about. Starting with activity analysis. It goes back to that. But that OTA is going to be the person who is providing that treatment, and the OT in some settings, they're not treating as much. But we're going to come back and partner with an OT to really look at what is going on. If you're the client, then, okay, hey, OT, Amir, what's going on here with Mandy? And perhaps they're going to do a reeval and then come back together to collaborate and talk about, this is what I identified. This is what's going on. These are the issues that I'm seeing, and modify that treatment plan, because they're the creator of that treatment plan. And again, state specific, as an OTA, I'm going to be able to contribute and collect data, but I'm really relying on the OT I partner with to be that person who develops kind of the foundation, if you will, of this is what Mandy needs. And I'm going to come up with some treatment ideas for sure. I need to have my own, bucket or box of tricks.
Yeah.
I'm definitely responsible for that too. But that the OT really is going to be the person who screens evals, reevals, interprets that data.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, completely agree. It's such a team effort. And I think sometimes, and we'll kind of talk about this a little bit later, but it sometimes can be hard, and it can be kind of tricky, and it's figuring out that delineation a bit. And like you said, it's really hard. Also as an OTR, sometimes, like you were saying, like we're not the ones always treating. And so you're going in there, okay, like currently I'm working PRN, and you go in there and I'm literally mostly just doing evaluations. You're going in there you're like the paperwork, like someone's like slaving you down, right? You're like, do the paperwork, do the evals, do the, progress notes and the re-evals. And, that's something to consider when you're going into the profession anyway. But, like the one who sees the patient in a lot of times and has that more of a connection with those patients, because they are seeing them day in and day out. And they're the ones, talking to them and building a special kind of rapport that you don't get by just doing an evaluation. Right. Obviously, this is not every single clinic and every single situation, but it is pretty common. And so it's like that collaboration is so important. And I was kind of reading on like newgradoccupationaltherapy.com. They had like a little, a blog post about occupational therapists working with occupational therapy assistants. And one of the explanations that I thought was really cool was, they were saying, occupational therapy assistant promotes the therapy process, not the therapist. They're not occupational therapist assistants.
Correct.
They're occupational therapy assistants. And I think when like you said, it's like those parallel, professions that need to work together, not like an ego trip or having control over the other. And, it is hard sometimes, because when there's a lack of trust, or you honestly don't even get to know sometimes the OT assistants that you're working with, and you have to put your plan into their hands. And, there is a little bit of but it goes both ways. Like the occupational therapy assistant has to trust that the OTR is like evaluating appropriately and looking at it, you know what I mean? Right. Holistically. And it gets a little,
it can be tricky.
It gets a little gray. That's why I thought this would be a really kind of great conversation. So just currently, we're just going to go over like the definition. Let's look at currently, what's the difference in education requirements?
Sure. So currently, if you're wanting to go to school to be an occupational therapy assistant, it is currently an associate's degree. And schools have different, programs. They might have a part-time program that might work better for people. Some have kind of a 1+1. So perhaps you're doing all of your prereqs completely separate, and then you enroll into the program. And then some have the traditional 2-year programs. You might go all summer as well. And then the entry level for an OT currently is at a master's level. And so it gives you, a lot of different opportunities, depending really what works for you. Like my brain is an OTA brain. That's completely my brain. It's what I love. And either there's opportunities for an OTA or an OT to also continue to go to school in other areas. It doesn't have to just be an OT. It can be in anything else. And for an occupational therapist, there's also different programs where it might be that your direct entry into an entry-level master's program. So you're kind of fresh, if you will, into the program. Or perhaps you are doing a bridge program. So you've already been an OTA. There's a lot of programs as well that have a bridge program, maybe weekends or nights if you want to go back to school to be an OT. And then there's programs where you have to have a bachelor's in something else before you start.
Right.
So there's tons of different ways that you can do it, and different schools are doing different things as well. Hybrid models, online, doing field works, little labs out in a fieldwork setting. There's just a lot of variety, which is, I think, really cool because, as you and I feel, this is a really fantastic career. And depending on what your life is and what matters to you and how you work, you have a lot of opportunities.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's, like you were talking about, teaching at the OTA program, like just that there are a lot of different, there's lots of different ways that you can use your degree. Let it be OTR, OTA, not necessarily, it doesn't necessarily have to say OTR, OTA, or sometimes they'll even say OTR. And I have a couple friends that are OT assistants, and, they're looking for new jobs and like, but it says OTR. I'm like, you never know. Like, you never know the situation. HR is just throwing it out there because a lot of times they don't even necessarily know the difference. Like, oh, feel free to apply for, a job, even if it just says OTR on there, because you never know what they're kind of looking for. There's lots of different opportunities, but okay, so we talked about a little bit about the roles, what the definition is. And so let's just talk about a little bit about like collaboration. So how are OT and OTA schools educating their clinicians on their roles and how to work collaboratively? Because I can honestly say, and maybe I could be totally, totally wrong because I've been out of school like 16 years, and you know how OT school is. It's kind of a whirlwind. I don't actually remember learning about the role of OT and OTA and how we work together and how to make that successful. Like even like how to do supervising. And I know it's state specific and that kind of thing, but I actually don't remember that every time, because I work in, more of a rural area, and I've worked with some amazing OT assistants. And we've been such a team, but I've also had some experiences where it hasn't been the easiest relationship. Right. And I feel like I just was kind of thrown in. And when I first started, my very, very first OTR, OTA relationship was really rocky. And I was just digging for information. I was digging on the internet, looking at AOTA website, like figuring out, like, I'm like, how can I be doing this so bad? So, are schools educating on that?
They are. And I think, every school is going to be a little bit different, and
absolutely,
how they approach it. They all have the standards, that they're addressing. But, the things that I've seen that have worked really, really well are OT and OTA schools who join up and say, hey, let's do a case study together. Let's physically all get together, and, we'll have some people pretending to be clients. And let's go through the whole process. Let's go through, okay, let me do the evaluation and let me interpret the data. Okay, OTA, what are some of the standardized assessments that you can do, once you've had service competency? Okay, let's practice that. Let's talk about it. Then let's role play supervision. I'm seeing a lot of schools and hearing just from friends and peers who are participating in those opportunities, because I think, like you said, people don't necessarily know how to provide supervision. And It's always different too. If you have an OTA like myself who's been out for a while and a brand new OT, that's a different dynamic. If you have two new grads, it's different. If you have someone who perhaps had another career, went back to school, all of those things bring in a different set of expectations and understanding. But I'm really seeing schools, collaborate. In my class this year, we're going to be collaborating with an OT program as well. And we're going to get together in the evening using, an Adobe type format to be able to talk about what is it that an OTA can do and what is it that an OT can do. And I think a lot of times this is my personal experience, OTAs have an understanding what an OT does because I need an OT to do my job. Whereas an OT might not know. And so I've been fortunate to go into programs and be able to say, okay, here, let's look at a job description. Let's look at the state rules and regs. Let's look at the ACOTE standards. Let's look at role delineation tools on AOTA. And let's talk about, hey, these are the things I can do. And no, that is not something I can do. That's not in my practice act. And let's talk about why. And I think schools are starting to do more of those collaborative inter and intra-professional opportunities to really talk about how do we work together? How do we take those parallel careers and each of us work towards having those really great outcomes for the client in whatever setting? And so I think people are having that more of those conversations and then additionally doing more of that simulated activity. And I think just those conversations, Mandy, are a really great place to start. And it kind of, everyone makes assumptions. It's just human nature.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So, kind of not to go backwards, but to kind of speak what you spoke about earlier, that, occupational therapy assistants are assisting the process. It's very different lingo and language than PTAs. And sometimes you just have to say, hey, let me just explain what my actual job title is. And let me show you what that means and help me understand what you do as well. And I think when people are transparent and kind of vulnerable, it's going to have a better outcome. But the schools, they seem to be doing a ton of stuff. I have some friends down in North Carolina, and I saw on social media that their new entry-level OTD program and their OTA program just had a collaborative day. And they did all kinds of stuff together, helping each other with transfers and talking about what each discipline can do. And I thought, well, that's fantastic. This is an opportunity to teach people how to work together, teach people how to have supervision, collaborate, and then understand both of the roles. And I think that's where I'm seeing people who also in the regular work job are having a better understanding, are more comfortable, partnering with an OTA if they have not done that yet, because they had that little, even just that smidge of an introduction is super helpful.
Well, I think you're spot on in the sense that, I think people don't really, as an OTR, I don't know if I really understood the skill, of an OT assistant. I don't know. I guess it's my own naivety at the beginning. You know what I mean? You didn't learn it in school. I didn't learn it in school, and you just I felt like I was kind of thrown into it. But I think those collaboration, having a good understanding of what each other does, can help build that bridge, build that relationship so much more, because you're like, okay, I know this person has a skill set, or vice versa. Or I know that, an OT assistant can do these assessments, and I can feel confident because they, are qualified or show competency or whatever, your state requirements are. But I think it's also, that was a really good, to note that, PT assistants and, OT assistants are different.
Right.
In the sense that they have different, even within your state, they have different supervisory requirements. So just because a PT has to do X, Y, and Z with the PTA does not mean the OTR has to do this type of supervisory requirements with the OTA. And I've actually seen that before. And, it starts having these conversations with well, they have to have direct supervision. You have to have direct supervision. I'm like, no, actually, I don't have to have direct supervision, because this is what my state practice act says, because we have different state practice acts. So,
that's
what I'm saying? It's not this umbrella between all therapy, even though you're in the same department and kind of looking like somewhat similar roles.
Right.
It doesn't mean that that's the way it is. So just wanted to throw that out there.
No, I agree completely.
So say, what are some practical ways do you think we can promote that positive teamwork? I think, like you said, the schools are really working hard on making that more of not an effort, but more of a priority, because we all have so much to learn. We're trying to learn all about theory and assessments and diagnoses and clinical thinking and activity analysis. And it's but that's such an important piece, because that is real life clinical work.
Right.
So how do we, promote that positive teamwork and, achieve those because our goals are to be client centered. Look at the client, look at what their client-centered objectives are, and we have to work as a team. How can we promote that?
I think really when I'm partnering with someone, it's really that very beginning basic communications. First figuring out, all right, how do you like to communicate, Mandy? Let's be honest, let's really be vulnerable here and really talk about, I don't do well if someone left me a note that said, hey, can you swing by my office? That's going to set me off. I know that about myself.
Yeah.
So really being able to have those true kind of very vulnerable opportunities when someone first starts, or there's a new team member to, the OTA partners, and really talk about,
Mm-hmm.
how do you take feedback and be honest, really being able to say, I do really well with you showing me. If there's a new treatment technique or you want me to do something different with this client, I'm going to need you to show me because that's how I learn. That's how I process. That's how I'm going to accept it. And whomever, OT, OTA has to be able to say, okay, I can do that. I am willing to do that.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe that's not my comfort zone, so I'm going to work through it. But I think you have to talk about how do you take feedback? How do you want to learn about something new? How do you want to talk about where you want to go? Do you have your own professional development ideas? Do you have your own personal vision statement of really where do you see your career going? And how can you both tackle that together? I think being able to have that opportunity to have that true conversation, not like running down the hallway, chatting like, hey, don't forget, you're supposed to show me something.
Don't we all do that?
But really taking that time and advocating for both. OT and OTA have to advocate for themselves and then for the client to say, we've got to chit chat, and if something's not going well, I got to be able to say, you know what, Mandy, this was really hard the other day. I had a hard time hearing what you were saying, and can we start over? I was having a really bad day. And I think when people are honest about their communication and they're always bringing it back to, we're both here for the client and what are those client goals? What's the outcome we're looking at? It can help reshape the way that you're looking at things in an ideal situation, I think. When people just kind of wing it, it's not going to be pretty.
Isn't that kind of like every situation? Maybe not every situation, but you feel like when you just wing it, gosh, man, you're just throwing it to the wind.
Yeah.
But then, it's also like that whole thing where like you can't have these expectations of someone when you're supposed to be a team if that is not communicated.
Correct.
If you can let it out, and I will say that is easier said than done because, like we have all these, healthcare is obviously always changing. And it's like trying to have a, conversation about your strengths and limitations or, you know what I mean? Saying like, okay, this is how I communicate. I also get that is ideal. And a lot of us are just like jumping in and being like, okay, I'm PRN. I'm doing this evaluation. I'll see you in 2 weeks. And then you're like, what the heck has been going on while I've been gone? And then, but you haven't been communicating because you haven't seen them and you haven't been, doing the supervising like you should, or, like there's all this crazy stuff. It's not so black and white and I totally get it. But how does what is okay, so when you're working with an occupational therapy assistant, they have to be quote supervised or supervision, and there's always the language people talk about, like I'm, being supervised or there's supervision. And, it's like the whole occupational therapy assistant versus the occupational therapist assistant. So we have all these state regs. Can you kind of maybe briefly go over what it is? What does supervision entail and what does that kind of look like?
So supervision is definitely required. And like you kind of touched upon, it's going to be different in every state and it's going to be different depending on your experience. I've been out for a few years versus somebody who's just coming out now. There's going to be different rules and regs regarding how much supervision. But you really, when you're having supervision, it should be an engaged process between both parties or three, if there's three, however many numbers. But it's right. Supposed to be an opportunity where we are talking about that plan of care. What's going on with the client? What is that ultimate goal? What did the eval say? If the goals were, this will be a terrible example, but if the goals were,
that's right, throw it out there.
We're handwriting and somebody is working on, I don't know, making a cake. What's going on there? Is there really an opportunity to talk about this is what was going on with handwriting, so this is why I was baking a cake? Or are we just doing, Therex because we don't know what else to do with the patient, or we're rushing, or, 87 call outs? Right? Because real life happens. But that supervision, we should be talking about what are those barriers? What's that discharge goal for that client? What are the things that we need to accomplish that are going on? And there needs to be feedback. Someone needs to say, Melissa, that I don't know what you're doing with that patient. Help me understand. Why on earth were you doing that? And how you say that is all going to depend on that relationship. But there needs to be that feedback and that accountability that's going on through the supervision. And I, as an OTA, should be coming to that supervision as an engaged party. I really should not just sit there and let you just give me info like a data dump. You want to know, because like you were saying, in some settings, maybe I'm seeing the client all week and you're swinging in on a Friday night to bust out a recert. Well, I need to be coming to you with really what's going on. What am I seeing? And then asking, let's talk about this. What's some feedback? How do you want me to change things? As OT, you're reevaluating all the time, and perhaps you're going to be changing goals and modifying that final outcome. So supervision should have all of those elements. And it just depends. Is it also supervision in the sense of observing the client? Is it observing the client while the OTA is providing the services? Again, depending on where you live, what payer source you work within, what's required. But you have to have that. And you really have to have, and this is harder to do than it is to say, but you really have to have it scheduled. It should not be that running down the hall. I was just working with some folks the other day and they're like, oh, we talk all the time, Melissa. And I was like, I know you do. However, if you gave yourself permission to have this time from 1 to 1:30 on Thursdays, you can catch your breath. You can go over the entire caseload. You can talk about some new treatment ideas. Maybe you could pull out an article or Google something and get what is some of the newest evidence-based practice besides just being like, she's refusing because she has a lot of pain hollering down the hall. And I'm a really firm believer that if you set that time and if you can do it for a whole month, it'll just become new routine. And you'll be like, how did I do this before? I just think people are not intending to cut corners. I don't want it to sound that way, but everyone is so busy that I think we're forgetting sometimes that supervision's a requirement. And you have to do it. And in some states, you've got to turn in logs. You've got to show documentation. You've got to show the time committed to it. So you're better off to err on the side of being overly conservative and have it set. And I think people will kind of flourish more. And I think we'll probably do some better treatments because we're not winging it, even though we think, well, we talk all the time. Well, sure you do, but do you talk about every client? Do you talk about, gosh, I don't know what's going on here. What do you think cognitively is going on? And can you go back and look? Or did we look at, they're having some vision issues. I think when you have that opportunity for supervision and true supervision, uninterrupted over a cup of tea or whatever, looking at the documentation, talking about the family, the barriers, I think it's going to be better for the clients in the long run.
Yeah, for sure. And like you said, it definitely is easier said than done. And some facilities and people that you work for make it easier and harder because you have, of course, productivity levels and things like that, that sometimes that doesn't get counted as quote anything. I get it. There's lots of things that kind of come up, but obviously our ultimate goal is to work on, help the patient succeed and work towards their goals. And sometimes I think even just reviewing the goals together is such a good way and being like, okay, like, are they making progress towards these goals? And we, like you were saying, like we do it all the time, but like actually sitting down with the person that established the goals, because sometimes the person that establishes the goal, you really do sometimes just see a snapshot of what is going on. You come in, you do the evaluation, and then maybe you'll have, OT assistant working on it. And they're like, what the heck? This is like, these goals make no sense. And sometimes it is just maybe the person was having a bad day or something was going on or, like family dynamics, or there's lots of things that kind of go on. But having that open communication saying like, we need to change these goals up because I can't be working on these because of X, Y, and Z. Like they've already, have surpassed that. We need to update goals or we need to, like, whatever that may be, just having that open communication. I mean, when I have worked with some OT assistants that have, like, we have that good relationship, as in we actually don't really quote work together because we're kind of working opposite schedules or we see different patients and we're not actually, you know what I mean? But you take the time to, review what is going on. It's just, and that builds that trust between the OTR and the OTA anyway, because you're like, okay, they know what they're talking about because we're communicating.
Yes.
You know what I mean? You don't just see some kind of documentation, good, better, otherwise, let it be on the computer, or that you can't even really, I've had some experiences where like in the software, it's like, it's hard to even go back and look at what the person did the day before. And you're just like trying to get a good picture. And so, just being able to take that little bit of time.
Absolutely.
If you can.
It adds up. And I know that it's wicked hard, but
it's so hard. It's so hard. But but doesn't mean I'm not going to promote a healthy relationship.
Right. Even 15 minutes, I think would do wonders if people could make that small time commitment. I think people would feel, I think they would kind of almost refresh themselves as well. And like you talked about burnout, maybe it'll help with that. I don't know, but perhaps.
Yeah. Perhaps that helps. I think healthy relationships always help me with burnout. Like sometimes it's not even just about, the job. It's the relationships with the people you work with that make a big difference. So let's talk a little bit about like specialty certifications. I actually just had a podcast go out recently about some specialty certifications and specialties that OTRs and OTAs can do. Because there's just different opportunities, unfortunately, for OT assistants than OTRs. But want to talk a little bit about that?
Definitely, differences, and there's opportunities for specialty certifications or advanced practice or, confirmation of skills in X, Y, and Z. And it can depend. Perhaps it's something at work. Perhaps your work has an advanced practice or master clinician program. Or maybe you're going through AOTA's specialty certification, and there's a set for OTs, and there's definitely a set for OTAs. And what I really think about both of them is, as a person, as a clinician, who's responsible for my own practice, I absolutely, why not? Why do I not want to go and move forward and try to get certification, something that I'm passionate about? At the same time, depending on what that skill is, another end of the day type of example, modalities. Not anything I'm good at by any means. So nobody, take my examples serious because it's not in my wheelhouse. But as an OTA, let's say I have some certifications. I've had some advanced trainings, and I'm partnering with, OT Puja, and they don't have that. I'm not going to be able to provide services with that skill set to the client.
I hate that, actually. I know it's part of the deal, but
I think that we can be creative, though. Again, having open conversations about, hey, are you interested in going to the certification? I'll be your support person. There can be mentoring between an OT and an OTA. The OTA being the mentor. The OT is still going to work with an OT to get certified, all that, depending on your state. But why not encourage that person? And maybe in the time being, I have to say, all right, hey, Mandy, I've got this client. They would really benefit from ultrasound use. Can you be my person for this one client? And being able to proactively, present that to your boss, your supervisor, to say, yes, I understand that's going to be more of a scheduling difficulty. And, everyone get your moans out now. But at the end of the day, this is really good for the client. And this is why. This is what they're going to be able to do. So I don't want people to think that they can't get a specialty certification if the OT that they partner with doesn't have one, because that's not true. There's kind of two separate issues, but yet together. The specialty certification, there's a lot of opportunities for OTAs as well as OTs, especially through AOTA. Being able to, if you want a gerontology for OT or pediatrics. And then there are, I believe, 5 off the top of my head for OTs and OTAs. So environmental modifications, feeding, eating, swallowing, low vision, driving community, and I believe schools. So while there aren't as many for OTAs through AOTA, we still have 5. And let's look at those 5 and be like, hey, how many people are actually getting these 5 specialty certifications? And I know for myself, it's one of those like on my professional development plan that I haven't been successful with. I just haven't gotten it done. But what a great way to put yourself out there in that supervision meeting to say, what if we both work on this together as partners? We can go to workshops together where one goes to one, I go to another. We share the information. We present different things together. Hey, I want to present at my state conference, but I'm scared to. We could go together. And again, we're both working towards our environmental modification certification. I think it's definitely from an OTA perspective, underutilized, using, that would be my personal say about it. We're not taking that opportunity. And I think sometimes it's awareness, it's time, it's costs. It can be a little bit of everything. Yeah. But I think looking at it as an opportunity, and then also looking at, okay, how will this impact the clients? Is there something I'm going to learn that I can't do because the OT that I'm partnering with doesn't have that skill? Okay, well, how can I support that OT? Because it's okay to encourage both ways, not just OT to OTA. Right.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I think those specialties and certifications are such a neat way to advance, your own professional development. And, especially when you have like a team that, like you said, like kind of having like OTA, let's say they have it and then the OTR doesn't. And just like, I love that encouragement. And it's kind of more like a teamwork, collaborative view, right? And like, we're like, okay, we can do this. Honestly, let's do this together. And then we can be a powerhouse.
Wouldn't that be so cool? Yeah.
Oh yeah. I love those kinds of things. But yeah, I mean, there's actually a lot more opportunities. Just because I'm on social media a lot and I get a lot of random emails or, messages and that kind of thing. And I do think that OT assistants actually don't always I shouldn't say understand, but realize all the opportunities, like you said, specialty certifications and things like that are out there for them. Like there are lots of things and encouraging, like you said, just because the OTR doesn't have it doesn't mean that it's not worthwhile for you to go through the process.
Because it might, it does, exactly. It's going to be a better outcome for somebody. And I think, like you said, many times OTAs, they're just not aware, of an opportunity. It is what it is. So again, it's like, how do you get the word out and share?
Yeah. Well, if you want to listen to my specialty and certification podcast, I'll link that in the show notes. But it does. We talk about that, like not every single, it's not inclusive list, but there's a lot for OTR and OTA. So check it out if you want to, and I'll put that in the show notes as well. So, okay. How about kind of maybe just wrapping up a little bit? Like, what would you say are some suggestions for some of those OTR, OTA partnerships where there isn't a lot of trust or there's a little bit of, what's the word? They're just not jiving. They're just not working. Maybe the OTA doesn't trust the OTR. The OTR doesn't maybe trust the OTA, or something has happened. Is there something that we can think about or do to kind of help build
and I think
that?
Sometimes we go into things with assumptions, and depending on, I happen to be sensitive, so I'm going to probably assume I didn't do it right, or, they don't trust me because I'm an OTA. We all have these bags that we take along with us. And I think sometimes really, again, it's hard being transparent and starting and saying, you know what, Mandy, I'm just feeling like we're not jiving. And I really want to partner well with you. Can we have a fresh new day? Can we start over again? And if that's too difficult, I think starting with a client, can we go and treat this client together? Can I watch you? Can you watch me? Can you really share with me what you know? I think sometimes putting the person, maybe if you're having a trust issue with me, you're like, I don't know what Melissa's doing, saying to me, hey, Melissa, I'm really excited about the treatments you've been providing. Can I come and watch? I want to see what you do. Can you teach me what you do? And I think by helping that person stop for a minute and feel really confident, it's a way to kind of get to, all right, I really love that you did this. And I think when you're working on X, Y, and Z, what about if we tried da, 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 da? And I think that's a very safe and kind way, to get to maybe understanding of those trust issues. Now, if there's something, going on that needs to stop. Yeah. Like just stop it right then, you have to be safe. But if there's things like, I think you could do that better, or I'm not really sure that's the best. What about these? I think by doing it together really can build that partnership, and there's going to be some trust. And maybe next time that person's going to come and say, you know what? I'm struggling. I know that I shouldn't just be doing Therex. And I know I'm picking on Therex, Mandy, but
well, I pick on Therex. So
I think it's okay.
I think,
yeah. Instead of, me going to that default, maybe I'm going to be more comfortable to come and ask a question because you've also humbled yourself with me. I think about when you have an actual structured supervision, you have that opportunity again, though, to go back to that trust, and you can bring it back to the client. Hey, gosh, Barb's not making progress. I really thought she would be doing better, or, her family is feeling like she's just not ready to come off of OT services. Can you tell me what's going on? So you can use the outcomes, and it doesn't have to be what you did is crazy, Melissa. I don't know why you treated them like that. But you're doing it in a softer manner, always thinking about the outcomes, which we should be doing anyway. I find that people are a little bit more accepting. And I think by showing people too, again, just, can we do this together? Hey, I'm struggling with this, new shoulder thing. Can you help me do it? Do you want to practice? Do you have 5 minutes after lunch before we, go and see the next client, and we could practice on each other? And I think being vulnerable to one another builds that trust.
Yeah, I agree. I think that if you can schedule the supervisory time is perfect because, we all have our strengths and limitations. Doesn't matter if you're an OTR or OTA, you have different experiences, different education, continuing education, all that goes into it. And another thing that I've done that's worked really well is also just be like, okay, this is our goal for our patient. Like, let's brainstorm ideas. Maybe you're like, someone's feeling like OT assistants can't think of any, they're kind of bored. The patient's bored. They're trying to, they end up kind of doing pegboard or something because they don't have any other ideas and they're kind of stuck. Like, I think it's been really fun to kind of just like brainstorm, like, how else can we work on standing balance? How else can we work on, or how do we progress, some core strengthening in a more occupation-based manner? Or do you have any ideas for this? Like, make it a collaborative, like you said, focus on the patient and throw some, it just gives you some fresh ideas because everybody has different experiences. And so, just like a brainstorm session on how can we work towards this goal with this patient because this isn't working. It's such you can learn from both sides, from the OTR, OTA sides. And just really obviously our ultimate goal is always working on the patient. So sometimes I think if you can keep that at the core, regardless of personality things, because you're always going to have some personality things, right? But, it's kind of life. But those are the things I think really do help with that collaboration. Like I said, easier said than done.
A lot of practice and a commitment from both parties.
Yeah, for sure. Okay. So do you have any key takeaways? I guess some of the key takeaways, like you said, is having some of those supervisory times and communication, vulnerability.
I think using some of the resources, taking a few minutes and going on to ACOTEonline.org and pulling up the standards. They have this fantastic interpretive guide that's for anyone to use. And it's just a PDF that has 3 columns, and it has all of the entry-level standards of an entry-level OTD, masters, and associates. So what a cool way to be able to look at the similarities. What are the things that both are learning? And then where does it start to separate? And what does that mean? When one is to be familiar with something and one other person or level is to look at, how do they gather that information and synthesize it and put it into something. And I think that helps people understand what both parties are learning. And it makes you a little bit more comfortable. Like, oh my gosh, I didn't know you learned that. Or wow, we both learned the same thing here. And I think really having some responsibility for ourselves about staying on top of our practice acts. What is going on within our state? Things change. And if you're not part of either your state association or you're not checking on your state website, you might not know what's going on. And I think that's a great way to build a relationship too. Hey, look what I learned. Did you know that, Massachusetts, we have to sign our names differently. Like, hey, did you know that? No, I didn't. Oh my gosh, you're so fantastic. Right. And people are like, oh, that's so cool. That info. And then they're bonding a little bit. And it's small things I think can make a really, really big impact for people.
Oh, cool. Yes, exactly. Well, thank you so much for having this conversation today, Melissa. I think obviously OTR, OTA relationships are so important, and it's I don't know, just advocating for each other's, I don't want to call each other's profession. It's just each other's, well, how would you describe it? They're not, it's like,
parallel
like I said,
professions.
just
We each
parallel
have a role
professions.
and really advocating for each of us to work at our very top of what our role can do. And being able to support one another to do that, I think is quite important.
Well, thank you so much again for talking about this. And I've loved our conversation.
Thank you. I had a great time.
So
Thank you.
And thanks everyone for listening. And until next time.
Do you feel like you're navigating the OT world without a map? Not feeling confident or competent in your day-to-day treatments and struggling to apply your knowledge clinically? Then be sure to check out the Seniors Flourish Learning Lab membership. It has all of the treatment ideas, patient handouts, clinical resources, community support, and mentorship you need to succeed. Join today at seniorsflourish.com/learninglab.